I am actually going to hand it right on over to Sarah Baker, who you may know, right? Because she used to be our student body president. Anybody remember? Back to last year.
What's up, fam? Awesome. Welcome, everyone, to North Seattle College. We're super excited to have you here today. This is a really great turnout, so thank you for coming. This is our moderator panel on art and community. Today's panelists will be speaking from their own experiences as artists of color about how they create connections between art and their community. This event is a part of a larger series for Black History Month here at the college, and it's in collaboration with North Seattle College Art Gallery, the library, and student leadership and multicultural programs. We'd also like to give a special thanks and shout out to Amanda Knowles and Zola Mumford for helping make this event possible. Let's give them a hand. Who unfortunately is not here because she is sick. Everybody wash your hands, it was that time of year. A little bit about myself. My name is Sarah Baker. I use she, her pronouns. I am an alumni of North Seattle College. I was in the International Business Program. I am a current board member of the Japanese American Citizens League Seattle chapter, and I currently work with a nonprofit called Wayfind. So this is very inception, but we're a nonprofit that helps other nonprofits. I'm excited to be moderating the panel today with such great artists. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So I'm going to ask our panelists a series of questions. A couple of them, 3 of them actually have some brief presentations. So what we'll start with is going in order. Please share your name and your main artistic medium, and if you have your presentation, then you're welcome to share that as well.
I'm Lisa Myers-Monash. I am a collage and altered books artist. So I make 2D collages as well as assemblage sculptures, and I also alter existing books to create new works of art. And currently I have an exhibit at the Northwest African American Museum. It's called You're Not From Around Here, Are You? And it continues until April 8th, so everybody go and see it. Oh, and by the way, they're open Wednesday through Sunday. I made that mistake of coming Tuesday several times. So don't do that. So in my presentation, I thought I'd show you a few images of work that is in You're Not From Around Here, Are You? Starting with these. So there are a few sub-themes going on in my exhibit, which explores race and place and how they're connected in the Northwest for people of African descent, in my point of view. This piece is a triptych called Bought and Paid For. It's one of 3 triptychs that's on display at the exhibit. And it explores what a black space might look like. Black space is not necessarily something that's tangible, but in my mind, I define it as a space where people of African descent are not just tolerated or even welcomed, but essential, the same way they would be in an individual's home, rather than just being an occupant of a house. This is a close-up of one of the niches in Bought and Paid For. You'll see that there are 2 images in the niche. The first one is a transparency image of my brother when we were both very little, running into the house we grew up in. It's layered on top of a painted-over image of the house that my mother grew up in. And this is another detail piece. I decided to use the crown fragment and the fragment of paper money to suggest both how important home can be, as well as the price that many of us have to pay to create something like home. The second sub-theme is about racial authenticity. I have had the experience of being the only or one of the only black faces in a crowd for most of my life. And I grew up in an area that was multiracial, but still dominated by people of European descent. So regularly, as I was growing up, I would get comments from people of all groups saying, "No black, you live out there? No, black people don't live out there." Yes, they do. And it was kind of hard to convince. It seemed like it was an impossible task to convince people that not only was it happening, but that I was one of those people. This piece is called Tourist. It's a collage on paper of two sets of images. One is from the Apollo moon landings. You see that the shadow is of the astronaut who was originally taking the picture, and the American flag. I painted over that and combined that with an image of myself when I was maybe 7 or 8 years old in our backyard. The third sub-theme, I would say, is in the exhibit is how we deal with the vulnerability of black bodies. I am looking at sort of both ends of the spectrum of that question in the pieces that you're going to see. This one is titled Saint Felicia, Patron Saint of Farewells, in her aspect as Slayer of Fools. You see that ring around her of hands that are pushing away, that are saying, "Bye, Felicia." And that came out of, that actually originated out of a meme that I saw online that I just thought was hilarious, and then I said, well, I should make something out of that. And to me, this piece represents the inner strength, the independence, and the willingness to go where you feel you need to go in order to be your full self. This is the second icon, Saint Felicia, Patron Saint of Farewells, in her aspect as defender of personal space. And on the other end of the spectrum of thinking about the vulnerability of black bodies is a series of collages I call Safe, Not Safe, in which I combined images from the Library of Congress of African Americans with images of water towers. I grew up in Southern California, so I don't remember seeing any water towers except on like movie sets. And at the time, I used to think that they were great places for somebody to run up and hide and defend themselves. But after a while, I realized every water tower has a ladder to get up to the tower, so it's not a safe place. And this last image is of Arache. In English, that's torn away. And it speaks to the fragility of black motherhood. Mothers and parents in general are supposed to be people who can protect their children, who are the first line of defense if there's any kind of threat. But the reality for women of African descent is that quite often we have not been able to function as mothers in that way. Oh, one last one, just in case. And this piece is not in the exhibit, but it's called "They Don't Really Feel Pain." And I created it using a toy bat, Japanese collage papers, and some fake Easter eggs, which I painted over, to talk about the vulnerability of black bodies of all shapes and sizes to police violence, to extrajudicial violence, their vulnerability in this country in general.
Thank you. I'm Gabrielle Namura Gaynor, and I'm a dancer who went to college for journalism, and now I work at Seattle Opera. I still do, I'm a dancer and choreographer still, but I also do PR and social media for the opera, and also some racial equity work as well. I also am on the JCL board with Sarah, the Japanese American Citizens League. And I feel like the older I get, the more my various identities in dance and Asian American activism and what I do at the opera intersect more and more. So I don't have a presentation, but yeah.
I'm Elizabeth Johnson, and everybody calls me Liz. Should I drive?
Sure.
So most people in the community know me because I started a cafe in 2006, a gallery. When I got out of college, I went to Cornish College of the Arts, and I majored in painting and sculpture, and didn't really know how to get into the art world. So I started this gallery that was on Capitol Hill for 6 years. So here's some pictures of kind of some are from our last day. One is from actually Obama's inauguration, which was a really great day. We had jazz every Sunday. So it was built to be an experimental art space in its definition. I was inspired by, quite literally, Gertrude Stein in Paris, and how Hemingway and Picasso and all these people hung out together with her, and they all had different disciplines, but they all like germinated and kind of reflected off of each other. And so she was kind of our patron saint. And this is more pictures. And it was a place that welcomed POC artists. It was one of the only places at the time that did that. There were some others, and those are vanishing from our city. So after that, I started working at the Seattle Office of Arts and Culture. I work in the public art program, so this is me with one of my artists as they're installing the Seattle Center. So I work on Percent for Art projects, which is 1% from all capital projects goes to making a permanent or temporary artwork, which is super exciting. These are some more temporary artworks. Because I actually get to put money into artists' pockets on a regular basis. And we like to differentiate that it's not a grant, it's a job. So we have a scope of work that we ask people to apply for. And so, unlike a grant where you get to cobble together more and more money, we're actually hiring artists to be embedded in certain situations. So these are just some projects that I've managed. One of them is Poetry on Buses, so I've also collaborated with Core Culture on their project. And so this is not an installation, but it's a poetry experience. And so this is the poet planner, Jordan Keefe, who did 10 poetry workshops all over the city in different communities and different languages. More artworks that I've managed. I'm trying to get this free. And then to my artwork, so I'm getting back into my own work. What medium I work in is really hard to answer. I think that I'm really inspired by Marcel Duchamp and Yoko Ono and all the other conceptual artists that you could probably think of, but saying I'm a conceptual artist sounds really, really gross to say out loud. So I don't like to say that. Me and a friend were really meditating on self-love and kind of calling love in, and so we did a project on Valentine's Day this year where we asked people to write statements of self-love to themselves using the hashtag Radical Self-Love 18, and we compiled all those statements into one poem, and then there's a link if you want to download the poem. So we had over 35 people participate, so it was super exciting and fun. And so there's some more pictures from that project. We also did a public performance, so we had these flags of our own declarations of self-love. Mine was, I will continue to love like my heart has never been broken. And then I just recently had a show at Juan Alonso Rodriguez's gallery in Pioneer Square. And so I was looking at my own personal journey of trying to find housing in the city. I was born here, but I can't afford an apartment. So did these mixed media paintings of apartment listings that literally I thought it was funny to paint apartments I couldn't afford. But more deeply, when you look at the language that's in apartment listings, they're really coded about the type of people they want to live there, the type of people they don't want to live there. So I started unpacking that in these pieces. And then, as you know, there's a keychain about me not being able to live anywhere, but I could find some love. And then I went looking for apartments and had a friend document it, and so I took audio without the person knowing. And I transcribed it. So there's different ways of approaching the same topic. I don't have my permanent documentation yet. And then this is from a show I'm having in September at Virago Gallery, where I am looking at my own personal relationship with food and people's in my past relationship to my body, to food. So taking true statements and stories that have happened to me. So some of these will be about plates, or on plates that, like I said, these experiences around food, and then there'll be some other things that show up. So that's my little spiel.
My name's Sarika Waters. I run a space called Martyr Sauce. Martyr Sauce started as a little renegade gallery in Pioneer Square, as a 30-step walk-up to my little workspace at the top. It was a weird, bizarre space that I was able to acquire, and so I took full advantage of it, storefront windows, all of that. Quickly became an Airbnb, we got kicked out, the whole thing, I don't want to talk about it. So we moved, quietly but loudly, we expanded Martyr Sauce into what used to be Bud's Jazz Record Store, if anybody's familiar with Bud's. It's underground and on South Jackson Street, and I thought it was going to be a whole new ongoing 9-to-5 kind of thing, but quickly found out that it can't be, because it's underground and it's weird, and if something happens, nobody can hear me scream. So it's by appointment only. And I have things happening in there, and I advertise them when I need to. And I'm on the art walk, blah, blah, blah. So since we've had the space, and I say we, my husband and I, with our 2 kids, because the sauce is us, this family unit. My daughter came up with the name, teasing my son for saying tartar sauce all the time when she was 7, so she named it Martyr Sauce. She would say, why don't you say Martyr Sauce instead of tartar sauce? We say, why would you say Martyr Sauce? You're only 7. What do you know about martyrs? You need to talk to us. Just talk to you. But we thought it was a great band name, so we kept it until we moved to Seattle. From Atlanta, I'm going to just be rambling on. We can talk after, and I can just connect the dots. And so we branded this space Martyr Sauce. So we've been having fun with branding and kind of turned into this conceptual art thing, too, before we knew what to do with it when it was. I'm curious to see if this is going to play. This is what Martyr Sauce looks like if this plays. The video. That's exactly what's going on. I was, and I've become a great cultural partner for the Seattle Art Fair since I've been here. I'm not going to, you can watch it, but
The truth of section
I'll
freedom.
also open up a beauty
Personal
supply
picture
store
of-
as well. My daughter, she lets me do weird stuff to her, and this is why I don't have it here anymore. So, in the conversation of equity, I thought it was funny to have a Black-owned beauty supply store and a Black-owned gallery. So that's why a little beauty supply store is on that counter. Alright, so I figured it'd be fun to do an NERD video. So shut up to them. Some of y'all bob your head, y'all know. No, it's okay, you still bob your head. Alright. And we always end in a dance off. So it becomes a whole thing. It's just a fun. We just like like to have fun, that's it. Trying to take myself down, I don't know how to stop it. Okay, that's it. I used to be on, when I was a kid, I was on the show called Teen Summit. So right now, after Trump, I'm like going through a whole bucket list of stuff that I'm trying to pull. Because the space is underground, I'm trying to bring some multimedia elements into the space to try to figure out a new way to showcase artists. This is me talking to Bernie Mac back in the day about why my school wouldn't let me wrap my hair because they compared me to a Klansman for trying to wear a hood. Yeah, all black school, by the way, in Prince George's County, in DC area, telling me I couldn't wrap my hair. Only in Black History Month was the only time I was allowed to. All of these fun videos are on Instagram. So this is me now trying to
Hey everybody, my name is Teresa Waters, and we are here in Pioneer Square, and the first Thursday of the month during the Seattle Art Fair. Come along.
So, you can click and go to the next one. I've had the good fortune of doing a few covers for The Stranger. I just recently shot the cover of The Hood Witch for City Arts magazine. I know she's hella fly. I was like, is there some kind of reason you're asking me to do this? I don't know. But it was fun. She's hella dope, and she's in the neighborhood. She's in Pioneer Square. And I started as a painter, so the little girl, of course, you've probably seen that image before. It's one of those weird, creepy 50s advertisements that I painted. I usually love like big oil scale, large scale portrait painting, and it takes way too long to do, so I just quickly turned into photography as a way to kind of explore figurative narrative work. And I use myself primarily as a subject because it's fun and fast, and I know what the hell I'm trying to say. And I don't want to compromise any of you to do these things. So I had a show at NAMM, at the Northwest African American Museum, entitled, and I always forget the title of the show, 100% Connect-A-Lon, the untold story of the marginalized matriarch. My frustration as an artist and a black woman artist, is that a lot of the men that I grew up around that were successful and made it out the streets as artists, as visual artists, were always telling my story for me, which I didn't appreciate, and I didn't like the depiction of how I was seeing how we were represented. So I wanted to have explored it in a different way, in a fun way, and things that I saw and I was told not to engage in. My father's side of the family was hella crazy, and I love that. And so I like to pull from elements that I grew up with. So this is actually a nod to my uncle, who is gay, but very much so gave 0 Fs. Can I say fucks in comments? They would take me and my sister to the playground in Daisy Duke shorts and would say, I wish somebody would say something to me. We was like kind of daring people. We were just playing and like, stop trying to fight. Anyway, so this is kind of how, being a mother, making the same choices that my mom made, and, I'm not my mom, and I am a mom, so these are child support papers that I actually got, because situations happen. But just trying to explore these complex situations and in a pop art kind of satirical way, simplifying it so that it's just basically down to 2 images. This is my grandmama. She's the one that got me in these nails, these cancer-causing things that I keep attaching to myself. And she'd always have a beer in one hand and a Bible in the other. We would all just live for Sunday. And as soon as she got home from church, she'd rip all the clothes off. I mean, she'd be clothed, but, full face still, nails, and Bible. I've had the good fortune to, I've started a redefinition with my dear friend Jonathan Moore, who passed away this time last year. And it's a year-long program. So we started it, Tracy Rector took the second the year, and now we're under this Hamilton umbrella celebrating the 90th birthday of the Paramount Theater. Each year we're bringing in artists that wouldn't necessarily be shown in commercial galleries, marginalized artists, blah, 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 we'll talk about later. These are my 2 pieces that are in the show. That's my daughter, of course, she's a trooper, that's my son. So these are just nods to the Paramount Theater. This is a funny little, that's available at the Seattle Art Museum gift shop. I don't know why they wanted the bottles, but they wanted these squeeze bottles. So if you go and see Figure in History at Seattle Art Museum with Micheline Thomas and Robert Scott and Carrie James Marshall, you'll exit through the gift shop and buy a bottle. It's $5. And that's it. All right, great.
Fantastic. All right, so we're just gonna go ahead and work our way down the line. So the next question is, what got you started as an artist? And was there a particular person or moment that really inspired you?
So I started out as an artist making handmade cards and just going to local little art store workshops. But I didn't really start thinking of myself as an artist until sometime after my father died in 2006. And I started using family stories and family images in my work after that point, because it grew out of my genealogy research, realizing that that my father was the younger of two sons, and his older brother and his mother were still alive, but he had been the one who died first. So I figured I better start asking questions about my background before I have nobody I know personally to ask. I would say that another big turning point as an artist would be actually the killing of Trayvon Martin. My oldest son, who's now 13, was 7 at the time, and I had already had some background noise in my head about how he was going to be treated once he grew from being a cute little mixed race kid to being what he is now, which is a half-inch shorter than I am right now. And fortunately, I don't think anything has happened, but it's one of the driving forces of the work I make right now.
So I have just, my entryway into the performing arts was through dance. And I was really lucky to have grandparent support and be able to do work study and stuff like that throughout my life, to be able to pay for ballet classes, because my mom was a teenager when she had me, so I didn't have resources to be able to do that, but I found creative ways to kind of make it happen. And growing up as a chubby little Asian kid in ballet, I didn't really see ballerinas who looked like me, or really even other kids who looked like me. So I feel like I now, in terms of what inspires me, I feel much more inspired as an adult, because I do see far more POC artists, be it in dance, opera, theater, visual arts, kind of telling their own stories about who they are and where they come from. And I wish that I had that growing up, but as a new mom, I have a 4-month-old. I feel very encouraged by what I'm seeing both in our community in Seattle and on a national level too. And so I'm hopeful that there are more, if she wants to be an artist, I'm hopeful that she will have more mirrors like her, both Asian American artists and also mixed race artists as well. And I just have to say too, as someone who grew up doing ballet and now works for the opera, I inhabit these very like Eurocentric sort of spaces, and I feel like a lot of what I do, both in my own art and in my job, is kind of dismantling that Eurocentrism, and also trying to open the eyes of the largely white audience members and artists involved in something like the opera, to open their eyes also to art forms that don't necessarily come from a European tradition.
That's me. What got me started as an artist? So that's like a hard question. I started writing poetry when I was like 12 or 13 years old, and that kind of was like my first art form, and words always show up in my work in many, many different ways. And then really into visual arts, it was really in my senior year of high school. I kind of got a bug in my butt and was like, you should be an artist. And then I was like, I don't know how to draw. I still know how to draw. I was doing collage work actually, and my teacher was like, you need to know about Romare Bearden, and my mind was blown. And then I started really realizing a purpose around storytelling and my place kind of in this history of Black arts. And, you know, I think even though I grew up in an artistic family, my father's a writer, and I didn't ever think that I could be a visual artist. I always thought that was for like the talented white kids who could draw. So, like I said, seeing an artist like Romare Bearden and then digging into Jacob Lawrence and Faith Ringgold and all these other people, I started really thinking expansively about what art is, and then really realizing what contemporary art is. So that's
yeah, so I grew up around artists, and so like my father's side, they were good time, blue collar, and live just, you know, you can forgive yourself on Sunday and get back up and get it going again on Monday. But on my mom's side, they're very sophisticated. My uncle danced in the Richmond Ballet, and my uncle Daniel Minter just had an exhibit at the Northwest African, just all black at NAMM. But he lives in Portland, Maine, and he's successful in his own right. And I grew up around this, but they are children of the 60s and 70s where there's this, there were resources. So, you know, both sides of my family grew up in the projects, but it was these, you know, what do you want to do? So there were these resources, community centers that my mom's side of the family just took full advantage of, learned martial arts, and my uncle, who's a ballet dancer, is now, you know, grandmaster in Taekwondo, you know, and he's had studios his whole life. So I just grew up around it where I just saw the work ethic. I didn't understand that you went to college for it or anything like that. And I kind of went into this whole, you know, being a ham and wanting to run my mouth and getting political things at an early age. I thought it was special because I knew who Malcolm X was at 11 and my mom never told me kind of thing. That's what led me in Teen Summit. So I kind of went to this performing arts thinking that's the direction I was going to go, and got a theater scholarship and then quickly dropped out of college. Don't do that, I guess. Went to Florida A&M, so I just kept it black all the way down, like, you know, and it just became this stifling thing for me. I thought I was going to Hillman, and if any, I don't know, it's like Grownish, but it's not. It's like Hillman. I thought Whitney and Dwayne Wayne were going to be there, and so it didn't work out that way. So I just was on the first Volkswagen bus out of town, and I became like this, I lived all over the city, and after I had kids young, I had paintings from friends of mine who were male artists, and they were of me, like I did this of you in class kind of thing. I was like, oh, that's flattering. And I was like, I need something else on the wall. So I started painting my daughter, my kids, or my son, and then that's kind of how it started for me, by accident. And then once it started, I was like, okay, so what do you do with this? Because I couldn't turn away from it. So it just kind of happened by accident, and yeah, I guess that's what it is.
Beautiful, thank you. All right, so where do you find community as an artist of color, and how do you connect to your own community?
I'd say that there's probably three main ways that I do that. I am, from time to time, part of Onyx Fine Art, which is a collective of African-American artists in the Pacific Northwest, and they have a yearly show. I usually show some of my work there, and so I get a chance to meet up with friends and talk art and all that stuff. I've also done some other group exhibits. For example, there was a Black Lives Matter exhibit at the Columbia City Gallery 2 years ago, I think. Yeah, that was curated by the photographer Naomi Ishisaka, and she invited me to participate in that, and I got to meet several other people that way, and I maintain those relationships online because I also have kids, like I said. I have a 13-year-old and I have a 9-year-old, and so sometimes I get to the end of the day and I'm not up for a hard walk. You know, I'm not up for getting in the car and finding parking and hanging out with my friends in person, but fortunately they're online too.
I feel like as a dancer and choreographer, I've always been kind of a lot more interested in creating art for my own community rather than for, you know, the Seattle modern dance scene, which again is a very kind of white sort of space. I'm actually revamping this piece that was inspired by the World War II incarceration of Japanese Americans that combines dance and theater and taiko drumming. Sarah's going to be in it. And when I did it the first time, I really sought out Asian American venues to perform it. So like the API month at Seattle Center, I presented it at Wingwood Museum and things like that. At Seattle Opera, as I said, I work in a very sort of white European space, and one thing that I've really tried to do is to connect to my own community with the opera, is whenever we have had you know, Orientalist operas, like just last summer we had a Butterfly. I've kind of got this habit of sort of sticking my nose in to that artistic process whenever something like that comes up. And this last summer, actually, we partnered with the Japanese American Citizens League at the Opera, and they still did Madame Butterfly, but we also had various panels on yellowface and cultural appropriation, and we had actually an event that was called Asian American Women Reinvent Themselves on Stage, which was a series of staged readings by Asian American women playwrights.
That's where we start again. Okay, so Seattle used to have about, Black people used to be about 12% of the population in Seattle, and because of gentrification, we are now 6. And that is something that is deeply felt in me viscerally as somebody who's from here. So it's like, where do you find community? That's a question that we're all kind of constantly asking. Communities of color, because they're being displaced, and so that was why I really started Pure Gallery Cafe when I got out of college, because I didn't know where me and my other friends of color could actually show and produce our work. There were other spaces at that time, so there was there was just several spaces that are all closed. I don't even need to mention it, but and so now I'm still connected to that community in a lot of different ways, and so we do pop-up events and things like that. But then also I stay engaged through my work through the Office of Arts and Culture. I really just try to go to as many events as I can that I see on social media, and meet as many people, because there's so many people that I don't know. But I think it's a constant conversation. There's something called Seattle People of Color Salon that's online. It's a really great group of networking group, and they used to have more in-person events, but it's also just a great online resource. So, but I think it's actually just like a question that everybody's asking. Where can you go to find folks and know that it's consistent? That's kind of my question. Building a community. I've been building it.
Sharon's been building it. I've been cynical about the whole thing, so we've had these conversations a lot lately. She is the angel on deck. That's a trick she built. Right, she built it. I destroy it. No.
We're both a little cynical. Yeah.
We're just talking at the same time. Yeah. So I'm not from this area at all. I've had connections here and there, but I'm not from here. My husband is originally from Portland. Like, say not Portland. That's like saying I'm from DC. I'm from DC area. He's from Salem, Oregon. Right? So, originally from DC, Richmond area, and then I've been all over, and I lived in Sicily for about 4 years as well before I married my husband. At the time we started courting one another, he was in Atlanta. So we moved here from Atlanta. And we were very much so aware of Seattle. We knew where we were moving to. We originally wanted to move to Portland because we were watching Portlandia as a whole little corny story. Like Atlanta, oh great! Oh, we need a break. So it was fine. We knew where we were moving to. And so when we started Martyr Sauce, we knew where we were starting this new venture. It was just, we're open and come in, you know, who are we gonna meet? So I wasn't necessarily looking for people, and I'm still fighting the term people of color. And I do this because I've never heard of it until I moved here to Seattle. I was black my whole life, and I love saying I'm black. And I feel like in conversations in groups, we should, if we're doing pronouns, we should also say what we identify with, maybe ethnically. So because I feel like it's something that white people can say when they address a group that are not, that aren't white. And I feel like something needs to lend itself to somebody's background so you can understand, so you can have a more in-depth conversation. I want to know who I'm talking to, your background, so I don't stumble and say something stupid like we all do all the time. So I'm more of a one-on-one, type person, and defining, even with black, even with, being a, Japanese American, anything like that, you're just having to speak for a whole group all the time. And I'm from the South, I'm from the East Coast. I'm not black, like Pacific Northwest black, or like LA black. Like there's a difference. And I think, we even talk about Wakanda, like they hit it on the head. It's, like there's stuff that we just don't get to talk about that often when we talk about culture and race and all of that, which is, what was the question again? As far as community, I'm just like, this is my community. So I get a little heartbroken when, people who don't look like me are messing my shit up. Because y'all are my community too. Like I don't look for anything that is gonna, I feel like if you get too much into community, you start talking about church and I'm a heathen. So that's kind of my thing. But like I said, I'm the devil. She's the whole right side of the conversation to have. I'm gonna stand up. Yeah, go ahead. I'm just taking a bit. Yeah,
So what events, and some of you have touched on this a little bit, but what events and activities have you been involved in that work to bring art in your community together? And which community organizations have you partnered with and why?
I have partnered with Artist Trust in the past. In 2015, I worked with them to do the Artist Trust at Large program, in which they would have an artist in various parts of Washington doing these presentations about what Artist Trust could do for artists, whether they were performing artists or visual or literary, folk artists, whatever. So I was the Seattle person, and so I did several presentations here and there, and my job with that was to find the cheapest place possible to gather some artists together and get people over there and say, it's just waiting for you. So I did that. My first impulse was out of gratitude to Artist Trust, because I'm also a graduate of their EDGE professional development program for artists. And that's morphed into what they call Art Business Night School. And they do seminars about business practices for artists. At the time I took it, it was 6 Saturdays in a row at Seattle Pacific U, and I got all this information in a rush, crammed into my head. But it was, I would say, for me, it was definitely life-changing. And so I was very grateful and was more than happy to participate in spreading the word about Artist Trust. Another great thing about Artist Trust is that they firmly believe in paying artists for their services. So I did get a stipend. It wasn't, something I was paying my rent with, but it was at least a gesture that I was taking out this time to do this for them. And the other reason I participated was because at the time I lived in Linwood, I now live in Bothell, and so, all the action is in Seattle and King County. And I wanted to meet more people, I wanted to get to know other people and what they were doing, and I wanted them to think about me if they were organizing a group show and thought, hey, well, maybe she has something that might be interesting that could contribute to this exhibit. I also try to participate in art groups that focus on Black artists and artists of color in general. There's the partnership between the Seattle Office of Arts and Culture and For Culture that's called Artists Up. And they will organize events where they, sometimes they're just networking events, sometimes they're more specific, like maybe they're giving people grant information and some coaching about how to apply for this or that source of funding. But to be honest, for the most part, I go to those less for the information, more for the people.
So in terms of activities or events that have brought my art and community together, Madame Butterfly was one example. And then last fall, Seattle Opera did this chamber work at Washington Hall called An American Dream. And that also depicted the World War II incarceration of Japanese Americans. And I told the powers that be at the opera that, we should really have real Japanese American people with a connection to this experience come and talk about their family history. Sarah did that with me. And so, so JACL had a presence at every performance. And after every show, there was a panel where, someone, unfortunately, a lot of the folks who actually experienced that are old now. But so it was a lot of second and third generation Japanese Americans talking about their family experience. And that's kind of one thing that I feel like I spend a lot of time doing at work. Like whenever we have an opera that there's some sort of intersectional theme going on, like we did an opera about a transgender protagonist's journey. We're getting ready to do another with queer themes, Orpheus and Eurydice. It's going to be two women. And so what I'm trying to push them at my work to do is it's not just enough to have, this great representation on stage and in the creative team with diverse storytellers and performers, but that we also need to be able to get the members of the community we really want to be seeing this to these performances, which especially with opera and ballet and dance, a lot of the time people cannot afford to get to those performances. So I'm trying to find creative ways to make that happen. With the transgender opera, we actually had, I can't remember what organization it was, but we partnered with some LGBTQ organization, and we had trans youth come to a dress rehearsal. So it was actually cisgender singers playing the role of Hannah before and after, but the opera was written by partially by a trans librettist, and so it was her journey and her story. So for the trans youth in the room to be able to see their own story represented, in an opera, that's not, something that happens every day. So.
My biggest thing, like I said, is when I worked at our own Bear Gallery Cafe, so the community could come in and pitch whatever event they wanted. We did local hip-hop shows, poetry readings, theater sometimes. We had stage theater readings. our, so that really built a community, and we really, like, if you came in the door, it was like, who are you, what's your name? So that people really felt like they were part of something. Since then, I do a lot of weird things, I probably do too many things. I volunteered on the Festival Sunjata Committee, which is one of the festivals at the Seattle Center. So that's the one that focuses on Black art, and it's in June. I also run a group with a bunch of friends, I forgot to mention it, in my PowerPoint, if you have it with me, and something called Collect, where me and a couple of people try to get more people to become art patrons. And so we rent a party bus, and we get a chef, and we take people around to all the different art things, because we found that a lot of people feel really intimidated to get into the art scene. And that's kind of another way of community building for people that don't feel welcome. And what else do I do? I'm on the board of One Reel, and One Reel runs Bumper Shoot along with doing many career days for different youth. So, and then through my job, I do my job as a public art project manager because I believe that public art is about social justice, and so I do my work in a way as a community organizer. So I try to be in community and meet artists so they know who I am and know about our calls, and then I try to do calls that I feel like come from a racially equitable lens, because there's really no point in me working together if I'm not really trying to shift them.
She said where she needs to be. Yeah, it's just, yeah, same thing. Well, not the same thing. Let me mention, as far as owning Water Sauce, it's been, we've been in business, 5 years now? And that's been kind of the focus, like how much can we do in this space and be open to the community and whoever wants to come and be a part. My husband's a musician, so now we do live shows on occasion. We gotta be quiet about it. It's Fire Marshall. Don't tell nobody. And art shows, but I try to at this point keep it very loose and kind of like I would like it to be more of like a cheers. You just walk in, oh that's cool, I want it. It's no pomp and circumstance, like it's just really nice. And I like to be loose on a very serious block where you have like Linda Hodges and Gibson Gallery and come to my spot, you're gonna have a good time. So with that, I've been kind of existing out of the space for the most part. I mean, with redefinition at the Paramount, that kind of took up a good chunk of time as far as redefining space in an institution that is, it's a privileged space to be in. Can you afford to go to the theater? No. But to bring, marginalized artists in this space that has a story, narrative that should be told in those spaces is important. And that's something, I mean, when I first moved into Pioneer Square, I did a public art piece in Occidental Square, trying to, my whole fight has always been like, this is my neighborhood, this is my home. In Pioneer Square, it sounds so weird to say now because I feel like I'm losing that fight. I always saw it as Sesame Street. Like I knew everybody on my corner. I knew, everybody was a character. I'm a character. Just, So I was a little naive in a lot of aspects before Pioneer Square. It's a long story, y'all. I'm in the hood. I'm in the neighborhood, in the community. I'm somewhere. I'm sure you see me out somewhere, or I don't know. I'm somewhere. Or nowhere at all.
All right, and our final question.
You're going to middle next time. So way more articulate than I to wrap it up in a first round.
But you're like the big finish.
I'm like falling down the steps.
And, Jennifer Lawrence had an Oscar. And she I don't see what you complain
Y'all ready?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, you're gonna host a cookout. Who's invited? The answer can be any artist or fictional character from any time period, and it says on Earth, but if you would like to go outside of earthly bounds, feel free. Yeah, go for it.
All right, so let's see. I thought about 4 artists I'd really like to meet. 2 out of 4 are alive. Betty Saar, I would really like to meet her, and well, actually, what I would like to do is I'd like to introduce myself to her, and then I'd like to sit next to her for like an entire night and just listen to what she says. Octavia Butler, I really wish that I had gotten a chance to meet her, or just gone to a book signing or something, but that's that. Paul Rucker, I went to his show at Coca. It was part of his Rewind tour. I can't remember the specific one, the specific title for the Seattle version. But he's just a really cool person, and I like the fact that he thinks so deeply about so many things that are important to me. And I would like to invite Rembrandt, you know? I mean, like, you know, obviously I'd have to have a translator, but, yeah, but, you know, Rembrandt was one of the first artists I remember as a kid looking at and saying, that's art, and just being amazed at what I didn't know at the time was the lighting and the composition and how people's skin appeared on canvas and all that stuff. But I was just enchanted by what he did, because it seemed like a combination of photography and feeling when I was a little kid.
It would just be me and Beyonce.
Would the entourage be allowed to come? Would there be like a
Not even
chamber
Jay-Z.
show?
No, not even Jay-Z. Not even the twins.
May the kids come.
That's awesome. I'm like the biggest Nina Simone fan ever, so she would have to be there. Probably a couple other folks though. Already have 2 dinner parties. Langston Hughes, Gertrude Stein, Marcel Duchamp. There's so many people. Yoko Ono. We have to have lots of really good champagne. I said dinner party because I don't know if it's a cookout. I might want it to be a little fancier.
Yeah, that question made me a bit nostalgic. My great aunt just passed away. This is not to be morbid, and she had the best cookouts growing up, to the point where we weren't allowed to enter when the street lights came on. Like, it'd start in the day, and then when it got nighttime, so my cousins Slick and Don, so Aunt Gerald's house, we had to go. They lived with my Aunt Gerald for a long time, well into their 20s. So Slick's room was like black leather couch. He had this was in the 80s, so you know, leather couch and the water bed and the TV, and so it would hit like 7 p.m. on the dot. All right, all y'all get in the Slick's room. And so we had to go sit in Slick's room, and so we had to come up with dance routines to try to, so a lot of, you know, Teddy Riley and, you know, all that. We were like, you got it, Shayna? You got it? Okay, now, one, open the door. And so that's the only way we could get out of Slick's room, is we had like a whole dance routine. Those were like the best times of my life. So we're gonna talk about cookout. That's the cookout. I'm grown. I'm smoking a J and talking smack. And I've done that since then, which has been great. The last time I saw everybody, I got to do that, which was fantastic. Bernie Mac is there. Tiffany Haddish is there. Frida Kahlo is there, because I know she can hang.
Oh, yeah.
Diego is there, but he's with somebody else. Gotta have some heat. And you gotta have somebody working the grill. I don't care who it is, because you ain't never gonna talk to that person. Just need them to be able to cook, you know, and say the ribs are done. You know. And just, yeah, I love randomness. So, yeah. Y'all all can come too. And y'all better be there. It's all about hands. Daydreams out loud.
It's just gonna be a room that gets bigger and
It's
more
bigger,
people come in.
right? It never ends. That's heaven. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. All right. So that was it for our panel presentation. presentation, I want to give our panelists a big round of applause. And a special thank you to North Seattle College, to Zola Mumford, to Amanda Knowles, and to Renee and Felice for helping to put this wonderful panel together. Give them a round of applause. Everyone, enjoy the rest of your day.
I'm sure they'll answer questions if you ask them.
Person, you know, that nobody's invited, because, you know, she's in the